YouTube. I figured I would hurry up and get this video done while I had a little bit of free time on my hands. So on my family channel, I posted my whole entire second delivery. Pretty much didn't spare any details, so it has everything that really went down. But I have some people who are a little afraid to watch that video, so I figured I would do a sit down and kind of walk you through it verbally, so I can spare the people that don't want to see all the details of that. But if you do want to see it, go check it out on my channel. I'll put it somewhere up here and let's get into it. So we'll pretend like we're on FaceTime because I didn't feel like setting up and doing the whole sit down thing. So let's just act like we're talking to each other, like we're BFFs, okay? I was supposed to deliver my second child on November 27th. On the 1st of November, I went into work and I started having a lot of what I thought was Braxton Hicks. Braxton Hicks are like practice contractions. So it feels kind of real, but not really. Like for me, contractions are painful, but I've always had really painful periods. So it was always really hard for me to determine like what was a contraction and what was a Braxton Hicks until I was full out in labor. But November 1st, I'm at work. I'm having a lot of Braxton Hicks. I'm a school counselor, so I couldn't really walk around the school too much. So it was really like hurting. So I was like, you know what? Like we have a half day. Let me go to the doctor and make sure everything is fine. So when the school day is over, I get in my car, I drive on down to my doctor's, and when I get there, she asked me how come I'm in. I explained to her I've been having a lot of discomfort, like pressure and things like that, Braxton Hicks, and she goes, okay, like let's go check it out. So we go through an exam and she does this test. I don't even know what the test is called to this day, but it involves a little yellow strip and they take a sample and they smear the sample on the yellow strip. After she had smeared it on the yellow strip, she kind of like hesitated and she was like, that's not really what I want to see. And I said, okay, what does it mean? She said, the strip is supposed to be all yellow, but right now it has some blue. And I said, well, what does the blue indicate? She said, well, the blue indicates some of the amniotic fluid. People that don't have kids, amniotic fluid is what the baby is kind of floating around in. So I said, oh, okay. She said, well, better safe than sorry. I'm going to send you to triage, which is the hospital, which was only like 3 minutes away. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'll go to the hospital. She tells them I'm coming over. They check me in. They do the same kind of exam. And they tell me, well, I don't see anything. And I said, okay. They have me hooked up to the monitor. And I said, well, I literally saw the results from my doctor's office. Like, it was blue. And they were like, okay, well, you know, right now it's not showing up. I said, okay, well, how do we explain the contractions? Because I was hooked up to the monitor and I was having contractions. Like, I'm having contractions. So then they were like, oh, well, you know, sometimes we start to have like, pretty much trying to say that I was in false labor, right? So then I was like, okay, well, am I dilated? And she was like, oh, well, you know, the inner cervix and the outer cervix, like, it's a little bit like the size of a Cheerio. I said, how dilated am I? She said, you're 1 centimeter dilated. I said, okay, thank you. So then she ends up sending me back home, the ER, the triage. So I go back home, and when I get home, I still start to have Braxton Hicks and contractions and things like that, but I'm waiting it out. They said if I have a certain amount within 2 hours or something like that, then to come back. I kept having a whole bunch, but I was like, they just sent me home when they clearly saw I had contractions, so I don't really see what the purpose of going back would be. But my contractions really started to pick up, and they ended up being 2 minutes apart for 45 minutes straight, 2 minutes apart. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to the hospital. So mind you, it was like 3 o'clock. It was 3 o'clock in the morning at that point. So I drive myself because my husband had to stay home with our first baby. And I'm like, let me just go. And they're probably going to send me back home. But I don't want to just sit here and act like it's nothing. And then for all I know, I could be in labor. Not a good look. So I drove to the hospital 3 o'clock in the morning, got checked in again, went through the whole thing. They checked my cervix, did all that, which was painful because if you're keeping track, that is now the 3rd time that I have been checked within under 24 hours, which, trigger warning, caused some bleeding, which I was not happy about because when you have a baby in you, you don't want any type of strange or anything from the norm going on down there. after that, they were like, okay, like, you know, you're like 1.5, 2 centimeters dilated, so you're not really dilated, but, you know, you can just go back home because you're not having any contractions. I said, okay. They said, come back again if you start to have like fluid or you leak or something like that, whatever. I said, okay. In other words, they're not doing anything for me. I drive back home. I'm still in pain. I'm still having contractions. Not happy about it. So 24 hours goes by. I stay home from work, obviously, because I'm like, this isn't working. I need to relax, keep my feet up. Maybe that's how come I'm having like Braxton Hicks contractions. I just want to make sure that I'm giving my body time to rest so I don't make myself go into labor. Then after I stayed home that day, that night, early hours in the morning, which is now November 3rd, I'm having serious contractions, like very much so in pain. It's like causing me to like wince, make sounds. I'm like hunched over. I'm trying to like do different things. They say drink some water, change your position, get in the shower, all these different things. If it's fake contractions, false contractions, whatever you want to call it, then it'll help you see that it's not real. So I do all these things. The contractions don't stop. They actually keep getting worse. So at this point, it's 5 o'clock in the morning or around that time. I told my husband, I said, take our first son to daycare because keeping him with us isn't gonna help this situation. I said, I'm gonna go back to the hospital. He was like, are you sure? Like, you were there a couple of times already? And I said, no, I'm sure. I really think that this is it. I didn't want it to be it because November 3rd versus November 27th is almost 4 weeks early, and I was not feeling that, but you know your body. We go to the hospital, they check me. At that point, I'm 3 centimeters dilated, and they're like, we're going to admit you, which means they're going to move me on up to the labor and delivery unit. So the first time when I had my first son, when they moved me, they had me in a waiting room, and then they had me in another kind of like comfortable, like, you know, like it's not the delivery room, but it's like the labor room. So it's where you're laboring until you're really ready to go. So I was sitting in that room for almost like 12 hours with my first son. This time, they didn't even put me in a labor room. They put me right in the delivery room, and I thought that that was weird. So when the doctor comes and checks me out, he's like, oh, you're 8 centimeters dilated now. And only like an hour or two had passed at that point, which was wild. So I was like, okay, they're like, you're about to have a baby. And I said, great. So I got my epidural, and they were like, you don't need an epidural. You don't even seem like you're in pain. Like, you're doing good. You're doing good. And I was like, I'm getting this epidural, okay? Because I'm not trying to feel all the full out effects of labor. And let me tell you, it's no shame to anybody that doesn't want the epidural, no shade to anybody that does get the epidural. But for me and my story, I always will get an epidural if I ever have another kid, which I don't want to. But if I ever have another kid, I will get an epidural again, because you get no reward for being in straight up pain the whole entire time, right? And you get no reward for getting some assistance with your pain. Either way, your baby is coming. The goal is for your baby to come out and to be healthy. So if you can do that and eliminate some pain, if you don't want it, I don't see a problem with it. So I got me the epidural. So after that, I didn't really feel much, and I was like chill. I got to take a little nap, and then the doctor comes in, and they're like, all right, so you know, we're waiting for your water to break, because my water didn't break, even though I was 8 centimeters dilated. They're like, we're waiting for your water to break, but, you know, it could break on its own, but if it doesn't, then we'll break it, and then we'll have the baby. Before she walks out of the room, like, she literally turned around after saying, if your water breaks on its own, didn't even get out the door, and then boom, my water breaks. It was crazy. I was like, excuse me. So she came back, helped me clean up and stuff. And at that point, it was go time. The nurse comes and she's like, all right, so trying to explain to me how to push, all that. You can see all the details of that inside of the video. And then I was like, okay. And she was like, all right, so we're going to try to push. So I said, okay, am I pushing like to try to get the baby out? Or am I like pushing to, you know, like practice push? Like, what's happening? She was like, no, like push for real. And I said, okay. So I pushed 3 times. And then, you know, she's like, oh, that's good. Like, okay. And then I pushed again. And then she was like, you know, at a point, I'm probably going to tell you to stop. And I was like, stop pushing out the baby. So I push again, and she does. She tells me to stop because the doctor was not present in the room, and the doctor went MIA. They couldn't find the doctor. So she runs out. She's calling, and she's like, the patient is ready to have the baby. Like, she's ready. At this point, the baby was in the birth canal. Like, you could see his head. Like, I was in pain because I was literally holding him in place. I'm waiting for the doctor to come. Everyone's waiting for the doctor to come. He finally comes in after, like, I'd say a minute or two of me holding the baby in that area. And then he comes and he puts on this whole blue suit super fast, and then I do one more push and then out comes the baby. So really I was only pushing for like 5 minutes, and then they made me hold it for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe. But my son was born at 2:39 p.m. and it was 3 weeks early, so I was not thrilled by any means. But he came and he was healthy, 5 pounds, a little tiny peanut, 5 pounds, 1 ounce, passed his Apgar test. Everything was good. He was alert, no problem. It was literally God sent. Couldn't believe that they had me hold the baby from coming out. That was wild. I have no idea what they did with the placenta. People always ask me that. No idea what they did. I had no concern for that. And I think when you're in the moment, unless you go in with a plan and you know that you're going to do something with the placenta, you would care less because you're not checking for that. You're checking for your baby, and you're exhausted after just having a baby. But yeah, so that's my story time for my second labor and delivery. I kind of did a quick version. Comment any questions that you may have. I'm an open book, so I will answer them. So I'll catch y'all in the next video.